खाशेल्या मुलाखतीत तुमकां येवकार. आज आमचे बरोबर असे गेस्ट आसात जांकां गोंयकार खुबशे गोंयकार जे इंग्लीश पुस्तकां वाचतात ते वळखता आसतले. आमचे बरोबर आसात भारतांतली सध्याच्या काळांतली 3 सगळ्यांत फेमस पुस्तकां द रोजाबेल लायन, चाणक्यास चांट आनी नवीन रिलीज जाले द कृष्णा की. ह्या पुस्तकाचे ऑथर अश्विन संघी. अश्विन, वेलकम टू द शो.
Pleasure to be here.
First thing first, how is the response to Krishna ki?
I couldn't have expected a better response. I mean, honestly speaking, when originally we came out with the book, I had expected that it will be a slow burner, that it will start out with a certain interest from my hardcore fans and then will take on a life of its own. I had never expected that we would get response from first week itself. So the fact that within the first week we hit #1 is a terrific achievement. And I have my friends and fans and readers to thank.
So the success for now is more than expected.
Absolutely.
Usual question, but very critical question.
Yes.
Why Krishna? When there is so much written about Krishna, there are so many interpretations about the character of Krishna. Why Ashwin Sanghi is writing another book about Krishna?
You know, I think we in India have heard so many stories about Krishna, but they all fall within the domain of mythology. And Pramod, as you know, what interests me is actually not just mythology per se. Mythology in itself doesn't excite me. I know it sounds strange when I've got books like these, but I don't. Mythology in and of itself does not excite me. What does excite me is if I can relate mythology to history. That if I can say that, well, Krishna wasn't just a mythological character, but possibly a historical character. Maybe the events of the Mahabharata were not just a product of sage Vyasa's imagination. Maybe they were real. Maybe the events that have been recounted in the Kurukshetra actually took place. Now, once you open up that, then it excites me. It gets my adrenaline pumping.
But tell me one thing. There are so many mythological characters. You have dealt with historical characters like Chanakya.
Yes.
Krishna, what is there in Krishna that fascinates so many people?
I think Krishna.
The shades of grey.
You've hit the nail on the head.
Shades of
and we are living in a world where 50 Shades of Grey is doing so well. But yes, it's Shades of Grey.
Shades of grey.
That he is a character, you know, where you can't pin him down. He is that lovable cowherd of Mathura and Vrindavan. He is the butter thief who, despite being a petty thief, is still adorable. He is also the ferocious young man who decides to slay his uncle Kans. At the same time, he is a strategist, and we've seen he is ruthless on the battlefield of Mahabharata, where he takes decisions where many times you and I may not agree with the decisions that have been taken. But that's precisely what makes Krishna so interesting. To a certain extent, when I look at a character like Ramchandra ji, it's a unidimensional character, all good.
You describe Ram as Purna Purush.
Exactly. And Krishna, on the other hand, has there is good, there is bad, there is naughty, there is evil, there is something intensely lovable, there is something terrifying also. That's what makes a character wonderful to explore.
Is Krishna more human than the shades of the Almighty or that aura of that divine that has in him?
I think Krishna, to me at least, represents humanity. He represents almost every facet of humanity. And that's what makes him interesting. So, in fact, if one was to say that, well, Krishna is God, then he's a representation of almost every dimension of human fallibility as well as human infallibility.
I was listening to you, said twice you used that word, maybe Mahabharata was real. And when we read Krishna ki, it seems real. Although there are disclaimers or everything, how much you believe in that theory that Mahabharata actually happened?
Okay, let me start out by first clarifying that the book is a work of fiction.
Correct.
Having said that, however, my brand of fiction always takes a certain bedrock of fact upon which I try and base my fiction. Having said that, I think we need to go back to probably about maybe 5,000 odd years ago in order to really understand whether the Mahabharata, the events of the Mahabharata are real or not. We know now that the river Saraswati did exist. For the longest time, we were told that the Saraswati was a mythical river, and that the Saraswati was not a real river, and that probably our rishis and munis imagined this great river. Now, thanks to technology, we have satellite maps and images which clearly show the bedrock, which clearly show that an ancient river which traveled from the Himalayas down to the Rann of Kutch did exist, and that it flowed through some of the most arid regions of our country, Rajasthan. Now, if the Saraswati did exist, then that tells me that the Rigvedic civilization and the Saraswati civilization was one and the same, because we have multiple references to the river Saraswati within the Rigved, which we did not, which we had this wonderful body of knowledge in the Vedas and the Upanishads, but we had no corresponding civilization. And on the other hand, we had the Indus Valley civilization, which had no literature. So we had this huge disconnect between what we saw on the ground and our literature.
But Ashwin, we Indians love mythological characters.
Yes.
We fall in love with them. There is an awe, there is an aura.
Yes.
How to differentiate that history from that point of mythology?
Yes.
How difficult it is? Because what you are doing is that you are taking some historical facts like the one you mentioned, and then you are weaving those historical facts in your imagination and creating a third picture.
Yes.
How difficult it is?
It is very difficult, and that is the reason why I like to call my books entirely fiction. If you notice, I don't attempt to even anywhere say that it is even partially based on fact, because I know that I'm treading in a region where it is impossible for me to say it's fact, because events that happened 5,000 years ago, even I cannot with confidence say that they happened. But I do believe that if today we were to take, let's say, great individuals of our current age, I know, for example, there is a temple in Calcutta where there is a statue of Amitabh Bachchan, which is worshipped every day. On the other hand, for example, if you ask the average youngster today in India that what do you think of Sachin Tendulkar, his reply will be, he's God. Now, the question that arises is, Pramod, that let's say imagine this 1,000 years from today, that you and I have been reborn 1,000 years from today, and we are having this conversation. And you ask me, Ashwin, you know, everywhere around this country, we have statues of Amitabh Bachchan and Sachin Tendulkar, which are worshipped. Do you think that they could have been real people? That is the way I like to think of mythology. That probably the story of Krishna or the story of Rama.
Is that the temptation of your imagination?
Of course it is. But that's what makes this fiction interesting. That these were probably real people, where a lot of stories got added on over the ages. These were probably historical figures. They must have been great figures because they were. I mean, we have writings from the ancient Greeks which talk about Christian worship as far back as 400 BC, which means that Krishna must have been a great individual to have been worshipped even 2,500 years ago. But probably over the years we continuously embellished. After all, we know that the Mahabharata started out as the Jaya, which was half of the size of the Mahabharata. Then it became the Bharat and eventually became expanded into the Mahabharata. So what happened when each successive paragraph or every verse was added? It was embellishment.
Correct. But when you are dealing with characters like Jesus Christ, or when you are dealing with a character like Krishna, let's talk about Chanakya later. When you are dealing with characters like whom people worship as God, how difficult is it to trade in that territory?
It's very difficult.
You might hurt somebody's sentiments, you might offend somebody.
Absolutely.
How difficult it is to get that balancing act?
I have realized that the sort of fiction that I want to write, unfortunately, whether I like it or not, it is sensitive territory. Because, as you rightly pointed out, the figures are figures of extreme worship, extreme love. I think the way at least I have sorted this out in my mind is that if I approach the figure with a sense of respect, if I approach the subject with a sense of respect, then that respect will have a tendency to shine through even in my writing. On the other hand, if I approach that subject with an intention to in some way lessen the importance of that figure, then that will also have a tendency to show up.
Okay.
So I think your motivation, your
Yeah.
intention is very, very,
Very
critical.
important. Yeah.
And therefore, in case you are not completely satisfied that the subject that you are going to tackle is a subject where you can afford to maintain that level of respect and dignity, it's better not to tackle it.